what did you make of Mufasa, the Lion King?
Well, that's a thorny question. I went back to look at my written review of the live action animation remake of The Lion King. Okay, you know, so because this is basically a prequel to a remake. This is what I said. I said it's one thing seeing a cartoon lion sing, but watching photorealist recreations of animals speaking and bursting into song is altogether harder to swallow. Does photorealism actually serve such an inherently fantastical narrative? On stage, The Lion King became a huge hit because the theatrical techniques used to tell this sturdy story required the audience to use their imagination. There's little space left for that kind of collaborative experience here, as every detail is filled in down to the very last pixel. Now, it was interesting that in your interview with Barry Jenkins, amidst the discussion of the very complex process, he talked about the North Star of seeing the stage production and seeing the stage production as being something that was crucially inspirational to him. He also asked the question, you know, he did the thing that you sometimes get. He asked himself a question that he answered, which is how does Barry Moonlight Jenkins do Lion King? And he said in that interview that he thought they got some way towards doing it. And as he explained in that interview, which is, you know, I thought was really insightful and really brilliant, that effectively the way he did it was that he directed the voices as if he was doing a radio play, and then he directed a physical version of the voice track as if he was doing a theatrical play, and then the last part of the equation is then to turn that into the photorealist animation. And so it's like 2/3 of that process are making a Barry Jenkins film, and then the last part of it is turning that into The Lion King. And honestly, for me, the visuals here were less problematic than they were in the first photorealist Lion King version, because I just thought there was a complete mismatch in that first one between the way it looked and what the story was doing. Here, actually, it seems to have leaned more into animation, certainly in terms of, I mean, I'm not entirely sure why, but I found it slightly less bothersome. There is a really interesting question about, you know, how do you make Barry Jenkins doing this? Because remember, Barry Jenkins was at one point going to make Queen of Catway for Disney, kind of way back. And so it's not completely left field in terms of, because he's such an intelligent and inventive filmmaker. What he said in that interview was that he got the script and he didn't read it. And then his partner said, you need to read it. And then when he did, he realized that Jeff Nathanson had gone, quote, in a direction I did not expect. Now, that direction is a story about finding your tribe, finding your family. So it's an origin story, but it's how Mufasa and Taka then becomes another character, how they became brothers, and how the bond between them was built and how it was tested and how it was broken. Now, that is, you know, Barry Jenkins' territory. And then you have a cast which includes Mads Mikkelsen and Tandiwa Newton, and I think there is some of the voice cast are great. There were some things like Preston Nyman as Zazu, who's taken over from Rowan Atkinson and John Oliver, and I thought,
that was poor.
It was poor. It was poor, not least because you keep thinking, why isn't it as good? And with great respect, I don't think the Lin-Manuel Miranda songs are as good as the Elton John, Tim Rice. Now, I say this as the person, I qualify it as the person who saw The Greatest Showman and said it doesn't have a single memorable tune in it, and I was completely wrong. And it is entirely possible that in 3 weeks' time, those songs will be, you know, coming out of every speaker in the country. I'm not. I don't think that they didn't sound to my ear as memorable as the songs in the original Lion King. Did they to you?
No.
Okay, fine.
But it's tough. I think I was familiar with with some of the songs when I went to see The Lion King.
Yeah.
Which is the old Tim Rice, Andrew Lloyd Webber thing about knowing some of the songs before you actually see the movie. I hadn't heard the Lin-Manuel Miranda, so they sounded pretty good.
Yeah.
And I thought the film was pretty good. So but I would like to see it again, and I would like to hear the songs again, and maybe maybe they settle down and live with you quite happily.
I am willing to accept that, because we've all had the experience of buying an album and hearing it for the first time, and it doesn't really sound great. And by the time you listen to it for the fourth time, you realise that actually Young Americans is your favourite David Bowie album. It's just the way that hearing songs and getting used to them works. So anyway, I think what you end up with is this. I was never crazy about the photorealist thing anyway, because I animation as a genre is something I have a particular fondness for. I was never quite sure what the point, but I did find that the original adaptation of Favreau was pointless. I liked this more than that. I think that there are things in it that I can see where they are Barry Jenkins elements. And there is something in there, and it is particularly to do with the way in which characters find their families, as opposed to things just being passed down singly generationally. I think that some of the voice performances are great, and I think, as we mentioned, some of them less so. The songs have yet to bury themselves in my head, and I don't know whether or not they will do. The thing that I come out of it thinking is, well, Barry Jenkins took on this kind of behemoth, and it didn't entirely defeat him. There are things in it that do feel like, okay, they are his touch, and okay, maybe people would want more, but it is a photorealist, what they're calling it, live action animation prequel to a remake of The Lion King. I mean, that is what it is, and I think he's come out of it with his head held high. I think it's done him no harm at all. It's demonstrated that he really is an incredibly versatile filmmaker, and the way in which, when he was talking in that interview, the way in which the talk of that procedure, which obviously, he hasn't invented this ex nihilo, but you can tell that when he's excited, it's talking about that stuff. I think the film itself is fine. I think it is better than the previous photorealist live action, whatever they're calling it, animation. I don't think either of them come close to the animated Lion King. And I am very interested that Barry Jenkins has such respect for the stage show and said it was his North Star, because watching this, you go, yeah, I can see that.
I think you're right to highlight the Zazu annoying bird character, which because people, as you said, John Oliver and Rowan Atkinson, adds very much to the comedy. And every time this Zazu speaks, you go, okay, no, this is a reminder of the fact it's not as good. I would be interested to know, from a generational point of view, whether, because I entirely agree about the photorealism thing. It's one thing, we grew up with the Jungle Book and the Lion King. So if you take those singing and dancing, clearly drawn cartoon characters, of course they can talk. Of course they can dance. It's not a problem. But when you see a lion that looks like a lion, a real proper lion, singing and dancing and talking to a hippo that's a real hippo, this is clearly preposterous. But if you've grown up with this as this is what animation is, maybe that's not as big a barrier as it is for you and I. But
yes,
I never once thought in Jungle Book, snakes can't talk. But I did find as soon as the animals started dancing and singing that it was preposterous. You get used to it. But I just wonder if there's a generational thing working here.
Well, I mean, the only thing we can do is to say, if anyone has an experience of this, anyone who's listening who is like a quarter of our age who has grown up with this, is that the case? I mean, you're absolutely right. It may well turn out to be completely generational, and I have no doubt that people will watch this over and over again. But I find it hard to imagine it coming close to the impact of the original animated Lion King.